I'm really pleased to be able to share more about the phenomenon of extraterrestrial hyphen human hybrids, as I think of them, ET human hybrids. Just in the past year, there's been so much more that's been coming into my awareness about this subject. It's just dazzling. About a year ago this month, a man from England, a writer, got in touch with me. His name is Miguel Mendonça, and a wonderful, much younger man. And he was very interested in the subject of ET human hybrids and had been doing some research on that. And then he found me on YouTube, a couple of films, talking about that subject, and realized that I knew a lot about that subject, a lot more than he did. So he invited me to collaborate with him on writing a book. That was last April 2015. And just several months later, after I were both putting in a tremendous amount of interview time and work, we published that book, which is called Meet the Hybrids, which was published in December 2015 and is available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. But in those intervening months, we interviewed 8 people whom we truly believe are ET human hybrids who are living here on Earth with us. And these are wonderful people, excellent people. We are just thrilled to know. So each of these hybrids was born here on Earth from a human mother and human father, but they were influenced to be hybrids in various ways. Each has a slightly different understanding of how they were created to be a hybrid. So some of them were created when they were normally in their mother's wombs, and the mother received injections from certain extraterrestrials, and the injections had in them various ET genetics. So that formed the fetus in the womb to be a hybrid. And in each case, these hybrids were born the normal way that we humans do birth procedures and grew up here on Earth in the human world. In one of the other cases, there had been sperm taken from the human father and eggs taken from the human mother, taken by the extraterrestrials. And then that combination had been combined with extraterrestrial genetics in probably the equivalent to one of our petri dishes. And then that was implanted into the womb of the mother during an experience, an abduction, as many people call them. And then that fetus grew up to be, a full-term baby and was born in the regular way. So there are other ways too, like for instance, one of our hybrid women was born in the regular way, mother and father. And then when she was age 6, she had an encounter with certain extraterrestrial beings, and they gave her an injection when she was on board the UFO with them, and that injection contained extraterrestrial genetics of 3 different species in her case. And so at age 6, she became an ET human hybrid. So those are just some examples, and but everyone has their own understanding of just how that happened. Because to see these people, you would think that they're totally regular human beings. They have learned to act like regular human beings. They look like human beings. and they have been living their entire lives here on Earth. In each case, however, these hybrids have all felt different than everybody around them. They've even felt very different than the families that they were born into, and certainly different from anybody else in school or anybody else they saw in society. And they never understood that difference. You know, if they ask their parents, why do I feel like my home isn't really here? And the parents would say, of course your home is here. You know, we very much want you, and we always did want you. And the hybrid youngster might say, well, why do I feel like my home is out there somewhere, and that my real people are not here? They're out there. I don't understand, but I keep feeling this. And of course, that was always baffling to the human parents. So anyway, these hybrid children realized that there were other differences too, which they discovered just through regular childhood experiences of having medical checkups. And in some cases, they had something a bit wrong going on and had to have medical procedures. And it was discovered from these regular medical ways that in some cases they had real physiological differences, different from the rest of us. For instance, one lady had a very different bone consistency. And wherever her bones were tested throughout her body, they realized, gee, we have never seen on Earth a bone consistency like this. So that was sort of another indication that, she really was different. She didn't just feel different, but she really was different in various ways. And another one had a very unusual blood type that we don't have here in humanity. So these things were part of medical records, of course, for these people, and I think are very good indications that something really is different about them. Another one of our hybrid people had a different muscle consistency. Generally speaking, she was a woman. Even in childhood, she was warned by her doctors not to play sports, doing nothing competitive physically, because her bones were so, her muscles were so weak. And so she's lived her whole life that way. And now she's a woman who's nearly 50 years old, and she still has to be very careful physically because her muscles just won't do what the rest of our muscles will do. So these are indications too that some of these people, these hybrids, really have differences from us. They also have skills that many of us don't have. They're all very, very keen in psychic skills and clairvoyance, and they can see into other dimensions. They can give very interesting psychic readings and even what they call star origin readings. In other words, they can meet with a person and tell many of the lifetimes that a person has had previous to this lifetime. And even in some of the star origin readings, I had one of them done by one of our hybrids named Jacqueline Smith, and she told me the very first incarnation that I had ever had from that total spirit state of being. My first incarnation was not into a physical realm at all. It was into what she called a celestial realm. And then she proceeded to tell me of various extraterrestrial species that I had lifetimes as part of. And when she came to telling me about the mantis beings, I just felt elated and thrilled, because in all these 26 years of doing work in regressing people to extraterrestrial encounters, the beings that in all those years I felt the most fond of were the mantis beings. Sometimes people call them the insectoid beings. But I had always had a very favorable impression of them, and how kindly they are and how unconditionally loving people have reported them to be. And I sort of identified with them in various ways without knowing why. So when Jacqueline gave me that star origin reading and said that I had had a number of different lifetimes as a mantis being, I suddenly thought, oh, no wonder. That makes total sense, that of why I have resonated and felt so trusting of them, so loving of them, because I had been one of them before. I realize that in talking about these things, it's a big stretch for many people, hearing this kind of material, hearing about the ET human hybrids, certainly just in itself, and also hearing about previous lifetimes as an extraterrestrial being. But in all the work that I have done, I've come to recognize that, yes, I do trust this. I do believe that this is true. It's just that most of us humans have not been aware of these different aspects before. That's one of the reasons why I really enjoy talking publicly about this, to sort of open up our parameters, open up our understanding of the way things really are beyond what we know about usually. So the more that I have been meeting with these hybrids, had hundreds of hours, at least 120 hours of interviews with these hybrids in order to write the book, Meet the Hybrids. With each one, I have had such an expansion of point of view, because a lot of their material comes from their extraterrestrial beings, whom they are genetically part of, and whom they have fairly regular encounters with. They also have a lot of guidance by their extraterrestrial beings. So consequently, they learn a lot about the perspectives of those beings. Those beings, of course, are living way out in the galaxy and other planets and other star systems. And so, of course, they have a different viewpoint of things than we do on planet Earth. Some of these beings are also other dimensional. So they're somewhat physical, but of a much lighter vibration, lighter frequency. And so to us, they might be almost see-through or almost transparent, because they're not as densely physical as we human beings and all life forms are here on planet Earth. So they consequently have a really different perspective of things. One of the perspectives that I really appreciate is that with all of these species, about 16 to 20 different species that are part of these hybrids whom we've come to know, they all have, independently from each other, they all have the understanding that there is God, but they don't use that term for God. They understand that it is the all one creative source that is in and is part of everything. And that doesn't just mean everything here on Earth, but everything in the whole of creation, the entire cosmos. So we are one with these extraterrestrial species, as well as we are one with all of each other and all life forms here on Earth. And from the ET perspective, they see that, wow, Earth people are so stuck into separation that each person feels really separate from every other person. And I will agree, I have always felt that myself. Now I'm beginning to expand more into a more inclusive point of view. But I think we're all very conditioned here on Earth to think that we really are separate and individual. And in certain cultures, like in the United States culture, it's been very promoted, very prized to feel that, oh, we're individualists and we have our own individual life and our own individual path. And that's been a source of pride, actually, when you come to think of it. And then, of course, we have all the separateness of Americans versus, English, or Anglos versus Hispanic, or whites versus blacks, or Christians versus Muslims, or, it just seems like whatever religion there is, there are other religions who disbelieve in anything that is separate from them and are very often very, very opposed to each other, to the extent of war and loads of killing. We certainly see that today in the world going on. And then we even have things for recreation, like we have sports teams in all the sports. One team over the other in baseball, one team over the other in basketball or football or hockey or soccer or tennis, even individuals against individuals. So it's very much an emphasis here on the Earth about this separateness and competition. But in many of these extraterrestrial cultures, they don't have that. They have more of a spirit of cooperating with each other, of each one peacefully doing his or her own part for the sake of the whole working of the culture. And they see us as being very retrograde in many ways and very materialistically oriented, which indeed we are. I'm certainly one of them, along with everybody. And it isn't that way. That isn't emphasized so much in these other extraterrestrial cultures. And what a difference that would make. So they're more interested in the spirit and consciousness and cooperation. So very, very different ways of living than our ways of living here on Earth. These extraterrestrial species are so knowing, they're so clairvoyant, and I think they must do procedures akin to what we call remote viewing, because they know so much about us, down to tiny little details I have noticed about individual people even, as well as the human civilization as a whole. And they realize, these ET species, that we are really fraught with danger of eliminating all life on Earth. We could do it within a few minutes if we set off our nuclear proliferation. And they're very, very concerned about this, and concerned about the consciousness that we've all gotten caught up in humanity, this over and against, this competitive kind of consciousness I've been talking about. So therefore, they would like to help human civilization on planet Earth. Instead of their coming here individually and looking remarkably different and probably having a really difficult time living here year after year. So instead of that, they are creating these hybrid people who are primarily human and therefore can live here and handle our bacteria, our viruses, just our way of living in this denser third dimension, and yet also having a good proportion of extraterrestrial genetics and characteristics in them. So these hybrids have talked about how they understand that they are sent by the extraterrestrial beings, and they were, even as recently as their previous lifetime, their last lifetime, they were a member of one of those species. They actually have conscious memories, in many cases, of some of those lifetimes as an extraterrestrial species living elsewhere. So they consider themselves bridges between their extraterrestrials and human beings. They are here partly to let us know that it really is true that the universe is full of intelligent life, and there are very specific species of many, many different types. Some of them more positive from our point of view, more loving, more helpful, more cooperative, more inspired, more spiritually advanced. And those are the species that these hybrids are coming from. So they have come to help upgrade the consciousness of humanity. And they're doing it in various ways. They're not making any big sensational deal of themselves. They just simply teach their classes and give coachings and teachings and counselings to various individuals. And they do a lot of healing work, actually physical healing. They have these abilities, and they give the life readings to help human individuals understand more about their own lives and their own purposes of being here. So each one of these hybrids has a different mission, and the mission always has to do with improving and upgrading humanity in various ways. So their lives are completely about the service. I have found these hybrids to be really delightful, wonderful people. They have a sense of humor. They laugh like the rest of us do. They are flexible. They realize that they are different, and they realize that many, many people would not be comfortable knowing that they are hybrids. And so they don't go around announcing this or, trying to draw attention to that. But when it does come out and they are asked to speak at a conference or be interviewed on a radio program, usually they will agree to do that, because that, again, is part of their mission to help humans to know about this, to know about the other species, and that the other species are very caring about us and trying to help us. And also they want to have people know that they are full of these special skills that they can share with anybody who would want to. So what a wonderful thing it is. I think that we're very blessed that we have these hybrids here on Earth with us. It turns out that they're all very articulate people, so that when they're asked to speak publicly, they really do a very clear, nice job of that. Just a couple of months ago, I was at a really huge conference, the International UFO Congress, and I was giving a lecture about this. And I was so fortunate to have 6 of the hybrids from the book, Meet the Hybrids. 6 of those 8 hybrids were able to be there at the conference. And one by one, after I gave my part of the lecture, they came up on the platform and they each had several minutes to talk about whatever message they would like to get across about being a hybrid and about the extraterrestrials. Well, I was absolutely amazed at the positive reception, not only that I had received in my part of the lecture, but how very much appreciated each one of the 6 hybrids was. So for the next 4 days of the conference, these hybrids and I were surrounded by people who wanted to know more and who wanted to thank them for volunteering to be here in this lifetime as humans, even though they are partly extraterrestrial. In each case, these hybrids are made up of 2 species at least, or in some cases, one woman has about 7 different extraterrestrial species in her, and the others have 2 or 3. So that means that they get to know about those other species because they have frequent encounters with them. And very frequently they're taken to one of the other planets, the home planet of one of these species. And they get to have, what a fortunate thing, I think, such a unique perspective about the universe from being on other planets and being with the other species. So when I compare our lives here on Earth with their lives, I think, wow, we are so relatively limited in our knowing and our perspective on so much of reality. And they get to experience it, and they are very pleased to share that with humanity, with anybody who's interested in listening to that. So, boy, it's fascinating. I think we're very fortunate as a humanity to have these hybrid beings with us. I need to also say that there is a very different point of view about hybrids as well. For instance, Dr. David Jacobs, whom I like tremendously and have known him for many years, probably 22 years or so, he has done a lot of regression work with people who've had extraterrestrial encounters also. And he has learned in his work that there are ET human hybrids who have been brought up on the ships, the UFOs, and they are trained to come to Earth. They have enough human component in them so they can actually get along here. And they are trained to come into Earth lives and live among humans. And he thinks that the purpose of that is for them to eventually take over the Earth. Now that is such a totally different point of view than what I have found about the hybrids. And all I can say is that maybe all of the above is true. He disagrees with my findings, and I disagree with his findings, but there's room for all of it. And I think we're just talking about different extraterrestrial species who have different agendas. And the ones that I happen to have the very good fortune to be in touch with are the ones from very, very benevolent extraterrestrial species who are here with those genetics in them and are definitely here for a very positive mission on Earth. I think we can all really benefit from that involvement that they have here.